Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you listening. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. I hope you ate as much as you wanted. Hope you didn't eat too much and things got a little crazy. Then I hope everything resolved itself in the best way that it could. My Thanksgiving was pretty good this year. Did have to deflect a couple problematic comments during a football game with a family friend, but you know, at this point in this day and age in 2018, that's almost to be expected. I'm really excited today. I'm talking to you right now from the studios at Earwolf in New York City because my guest on the show this week is podcast host Dan Pashman, host of the Sporkful on Stitcher. Dan is a guy I've known through listening to his show, but I had never sat down and talked with him for an extended period of time. So I was really curious to kind of learn about his background because I had always assumed he had this big culinary background. And as the conversation went on, I learned a lot of different things and a lot of stuff about creating radio and collaboration, as well as interview technique, which if anyone hosts a podcast or is looking to host a podcast, something I talk to a lot about is the nuance and quality of interviews that I try to get. And it was really eye-opening and interesting conversation, and I learned a lot talking to Dan. So I'm really excited to share that with you guys. In other news, it is almost 2019, so make sure to keep listening because I'm going to be doing a lot more stand-up dates and my one-man show, my storytelling one-man show again in the new year. So make sure you follow me on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and you subscribe to the show on iTunes or add it to your favorites on Stitcher, so that I can keep you the listener, updated on stuff that I've got going on, because I really appreciate you guys continuing to follow the show. And if I could see you at a live show sometime, that would be a treat. So thank you guys very much for listening. And let's go to my chat with the Sporkful's Dan Pashman.
I go with the Zoom too.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like for such a simple, like low, inexpensive thing, it works wonders.
Yeah. No, it's perfect. You don't need anything else.
Yeah. Like I've done like film shoots with this. Have you ever used the H6?
Is that the one with the 4 inputs?
Yeah, the 4 inputs, and it's like a more intense digital read.
No, I haven't gotten that advanced yet.
Yeah, neither have I, Dan.
I have the this is the H4. I had this one for a while, and then I got one, the newer one with 2 inputs is what I use now.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, no.
Yeah.
I don't have I haven't had need for 4 inputs on the road yet.
Uh-huh. I mean, for the kind of stuff that I think I have this theory, and I've done it. I've had it at live shows as well. When you have like 4 inputs, so you have like 4 people talking in like a morning zoo crew kind of situation, 4 people's too many. Like 3 is like the perfect amount I like for doing audio interviews.
Yeah.
Have you found that like it's just like too chatty, like everyone's talking over each other, nightmare to edit?
It's a lot to edit, and also, I know we all like to think that our voices are so different and unique, but actually the truth is that like people of the same gender and about the same age tend to, a lot of us sound similar.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like if you get, especially if you have 4 people, if they're all men or all women, and if they're about the same age, it's like it gets very hard to tell who's who.
Yeah.
So yeah, too confusing.
Yeah, I find like fewer people, but then like fewer. I like fewer people and then more episodes is usually what I like to do.
That's a good plan.
Yeah,
I can get behind that.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you, Dan. So I know you were telling me that you on your show, The Sporkful, you're not doing Thanksgiving specials anymore. But since Thanksgiving just happened, I'm curious how your Thanksgiving was.
It was very good, thank you. It was especially good because I didn't have to do a Thanksgiving special. The Thanksgiving itself went very well. I spatchcocked the turkey, which is all the rage nowadays.
Oh, what's that?
It's basically butterflying the turkey. You cut out the backbone and you lay it flat.
Right.
And you can't stuff it that way, but it cooks a lot faster and it cooks more evenly. I did it mostly because I just wanted it to cook faster because it was like,
yeah,
you know, like when I was younger and I had a lot of time, I'd be like, oh, I love Thanksgiving. You like spend the whole day in the kitchen and you're drinking and your family's around and it's a very like idyllic image in theory, but like I don't think it works like that in reality.
Yeah, because in reality, you know, people get there and then there's like a pressure once the guests are there.
Right.
People start getting hungry and if something starts taking longer.
Exactly. And like my kitchen was going to be used in the morning. My mom was coming to make cookies with all the grandkids, and it's like, so then I couldn't put the turkey in the oven until like noon. So like,
right,
you spatchcock it cooks much faster.
Yeah. How big a turkey was it?
18.5 pounds.
It's a pretty big sized bird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what kind of rub do you do? Do you like do an advanced day brine?
I do a straight dry brine, just salt.
Dry brine.
Salt coating all over it for like 48 hours I did.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, my lady's family is like very Thanksgiving is like their thing. I've never gotten into like cooking the stuffing in the bird. Like I like the stuffing separate, and she has this amazing like sausage and cornbread stuffing recipe that is just aces, and it's like a competition between her stuffing and her mom's, and she wins every year. That's like the age-old battle. So you do like the whole like traditional spread. You're the cook on Thanksgiving.
I mean, I do the turkey and the stuffing, and I do some veggies. But like my mom brings some veggies, and my sister-in-law brought cranberries. My wife makes the mashed potatoes. That's her specialty. She's a big potato fiend.
Yeah.
So everyone pitches in, but I do the turkey and the stuffing. Those are my
That's sort
top
of like
priorities.
your area.
Right.
Has it always been like that?
I mean, growing up, my mom cooked, and then there was the transitional period where like we would go back to my mom's house, or like since we bought a house, I've been the one cooking the turkey.
Yeah, was that like a big moment for you to assume the mantle of Thanksgiving cooking?
Sure, yeah, and I was preparing for it, Will. I prepared for it in advance. There was a couple years before we had a house. We were still living in an apartment in the city. My brother and sister-in-law lived in an apartment, or they had a house across the street in Brooklyn. They had a much bigger place. They had a nice big kitchen. So I said to my wife, I said, let's do a thing with them on Christmas where I cook a whole turkey in their kitchen, because that will be practice for when we have a home and we're hosting Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Because that back then we were one bedroom apartments. We were still going to my mom's house for Thanksgiving.
Right.
So that became a thing. And the very first time that I cooked a whole turkey, I mean, I got very into it. And I brined it, and I was cooking it, I was roasting it, and we had a couple families come over. So it was like 3 families and probably several kids, and the whole day I was very worked up and very focused and trying to make this my first ever turkey be super amazing. And finally the turkey comes out of the oven and it's resting, and all the side dishes are coming together. There's mac and cheese, and there's veggies and potatoes and stuffing, and people are coming to the table, and the kids are coming and sitting down, and I carve up the turkey and I present my first ever whole turkey, and I sit down at the table and I take my own portion and cut off a piece and go to take my very first bite, and at that moment, one of the other kids at the table vomited mac and cheese all over herself and the table. I believe that some of the vomited mac and cheese may have ended up on the turkey that I just cooked.
No.
And the most vivid part of my memory is that some of the mac and cheese, I looked up at her and I saw some of the mac and cheese coming out of her nose.
Oh, no. Oh, that's like an intense level of vomiting.
Right. This was like Exorcist level mac and cheese vomit. And that's all I remember. I don't remember if the turkey tasted good or not, but I can tell you that the turkey was not as good. And then everyone jumped up to start cleaning up the vomited mac and cheese. So by the time anyone ate the turkey that I had slaved over, it was cold. And,
Yeah, and it's just like a theoretical how good was the turkey.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me think of like I watch Chopped a lot. I don't know if you've ever been on that show or
no,
judged on that show.
I've watched it, but I've not been on it. Yeah.
It reminds me, there's every couple episodes someone either has a catastrophic issue where the judges can't taste the food, like they drop it and then they just have to serve it for presentation, or they cut themselves and bleed on it, and it's just like all of this work and then it's just deflated.
Yeah.
So this is growing up. You're from Jersey, right?
Yes, that's right.
What part of New Jersey?
A little town called Upper Saddle River. It's like way up northern New Jersey, on the Rockland County border. It's even north of Manhattan.
Oh wow! So like further, like
5 minutes
north.
from the New York State border.
Okay. Yeah. So so small town. And what was your family life like? Do you have siblings?
I have a younger brother.
My
brother Howard. He was born on my third birthday.
So you share a birthday.
We share a birthday. Yes, we're not twins. And until I was 6, I thought that all brothers were born on the same day, but it turns out that's not true. Only us and some others. And yeah, I mean, food was a big deal in our house growing up. We grew up. It was a pretty typical suburban growing up. We went to public school. We came into the city sometimes. We ate a lot.
What did your parents do?
My dad was a lawyer, and my mom was a family marriage counselor, like LCSW, social worker.
Social worker. Okay, so public service kind of stuff. What kind of law did your dad practice? Because my lady's family's all lawyers.
Oh, yeah. So I come from a long line of lawyers.
Oh, yeah?
Which plays into my podcast sometimes. He was sort of like a general practitioner in a lot of ways. He wasn't, nowadays every lawyer has a specialist. My dad was a little bit of old school, like sometimes he was going to court, sometimes he did real estate, sometimes he did divorces. He didn't do criminal stuff, but kind of like all different kinds of litigation and contracts and all those things.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm getting a sense of that. So a lot of I guess general kind of cases as opposed to like criminal specific or
not criminal, right? Usually that was always kind of a specialty, but like in terms of litigation and contracts and real estate, like this guy wants to open a restaurant on this property on Route 17, and like he needs someone to like do the contract for his lease or whatever.
Gotcha.
Or like this couple's getting divorced and they need a lawyer, or, or anything like that. So
okay, gotcha. So it sounds like I always imagine my idea of Jersey as there is when I think of like your typical like American suburbia growing up sort of experience outside of, because I'm from the boonies of Maryland, so I feel like it was similar. But Jersey, I feel, based on like my time there, is very much that prototypical American suburban experience. Is that kind of what it was for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's exactly a prototypical American suburban experience. Like I think there are variations. I mean, maybe a person from Mars or from a super urban or rural community would say they're all the same. But like where I grew up was one of those places in some ways similar to where I live now, which is way out on Long Island, which is like when my parents bought a house there, it was considered far from the city. Like it was kind of considered like the boonies, and it was like a sort of, it was far from the city. There was still a lot of trees and like a lot of like big properties and a lot of land. And then over time, as more and more people got priced out of the city and moved out, it became just like a regular suburb. And like now it's kind of one of the almost closer suburbs. The town hasn't moved.
Right. But it's considered closer.
Right. But what is relative to everything else, now many people have, an hour plus commute to get to the city. So because they've been pushed farther and farther out.
Yeah, I was reading about that, like starting with I was reading some article about like the like where the art community, like there's the folk scene that's happening in Greenwich Village in the 60s, and then all of those people got priced out to Williamsburg, and then now they're getting priced out even further out into Brooklyn.
Right.
That's so interesting to me. And Long Island's cool. You like it? Where you're
I mean, it's pros and cons. Like everything in life. If you're not if you're not massively wealthy, like you got to make compromises where you're going to live. If you want to live in the city, you probably live in a shoebox. So like we have a nice house that we can afford. It has 4 bedrooms and it has good public schools. We don't have to stress about getting our kids into school.
That's good. That's important.
And we live 10 minutes from the beach. And like we live 10 minutes, 20 minutes from farms, and like there's a sort of if you drive in the right direction, it can feel pretty rural pretty quickly, which I really like. There's a lot of trees, and there's horses, and there's farms, and there's the beach. But it's far from the city, so like it takes me a really long time to come into the city. If we want to do anything special in the city, it takes forever to get home.
Right.
And it's kind of it can be. Like there's pros and cons to living in a small town, let's just say.
I do love that about the New York area, though. I love that you can be in this epicenter of the world in Manhattan, and then you can go 45 minutes out into Brooklyn, and it's like lakes and forest and parks and
Right.
and the beaches and beaches. I love that about this area, though.
But I feel like you have to go farther in New York than most other places. You know, like if you're in Vancouver, you can be like on the top of a beautiful mountain in 45 minutes.
That's true.
You know, like the sprawl in New York, like the distance that you have to travel to get to something that feels like you're really far from the city.
Yeah, I could see that. To me, like when I first got into college, and I went to Towson University, which is just in Baltimore County. That's like a big city compared to like where I grew up. I was like, I can walk to a Barnes and Noble. Oh my God, it was just like blowing my mind.
Where did you grow up in Maryland?
Calvert County. The actual city I grew up, where my mom's address was. I lived in Lusby, which is like population of 800, and then I lived in St. Leonard after my grandfather passed away.
So this is like Western Maryland?
Yes. I would say it's
Isn't there
about
an area of Maryland called Horse Country? Is this
there
that area?
There are some there are horse farms near where I live. It's about an hour south of DC. So the main road that goes through is Route 2 and 4, and if you stay on 2 and 4 going north, you'll end up at Pennsylvania Avenue.
Got it.
So sometimes I call my mom and I'm like, "Hey, do something about your neighbor." he's causing some difficulties for me.
Right.
So I'm curious. When you were in high school, this is something I ask a lot. What sort of person were you in high school? Like I was a theater geek. So were you cooking by that time? Or when did that, because I have this aspect before you have this successful podcast that you have a culinary background. I'm trying to see what that was.
No, I don't really have a culinary background.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no. I mean, I waited tables in college, and I always liked to cook, and I loved to eat. But no, I'm not a trained chef. I had never really done anything particular in food before I launched the Sporkful podcast. More of my background was like in news radio, talk radio, talk radio.
So were you like the AV kid in?
Well, I was
high
like
school?
I was in the newspaper. I was like media. I was into media. I was always like on the newspaper in high school. I was in the newspaper in college. I did like Model UN. I played tennis. I played sports, and I never wanted to fit too much into any one group. Mm-hmm. I was never like super devoted to one thing. Like, so I would play sports one season, and I did the newspaper, and then I would do something else. But like I like to sort of be like a little bit of a loner who got along with different groups and could make friends with different groups. But like,
yeah,
I never committed too much to any one thing. I didn't have like my one group that was like my super hardcore, the people I hung out with every day for 4 years, kind of thing.
Yeah, the loner who can mingle amongst the different tribes. That's something I relate to heavily. Like wanting to be that, like wanting to be like my own self, but then like everyone else to like, oh, Will's cool or Dan's cool.
Right. Exactly.
Gotcha. So yeah, if you're going between like the newspaper and tennis, yeah, it sounds like there's a mix of like the more intellectual side and then the athletic side.
Right.
And so it was journalism early for you. I wonder, do you think is there a specific moment that drew you towards journalism?
I mean, I always liked writing, so I got into the newspaper even in grade school. And so I was into that. And I mean, I don't know that I was really drawn to journalism. I was more drawn to media. I was never like, oh, I want to like expose the misdeeds of those in power. Like I was never like into journalism in that way. Like it's great that people do that, and I have done a little bit of that, but that was never like what I was super excited to do. I was really more interested in media and communications, like whether it was going to be funny or to connect with people in some way. I remember like I was a tour guide in college, and there was a time I was liked being, having a captive audience, getting to be the center of attention. Like after one of my tours, one of the fathers came up to me and he was like, "You need to be in communications. You're really good at communicating with people."
What were you giving tours of?
The college, the campus.
Oh yeah, so you're just like
here's this dorm building, and like here's an interesting fact, and blah blah blah. And so he said that, and like I remember I was interested in radio. There was a thing that I went to college at Tufts University, and they did a thing called
Where's that?
It's near Boston.
Okay,
Somerville / Medford, Massachusetts.
Gotcha.
And they did this charity thing, and my roommate and I won like 4 hours on the radio, the college radio station.
Mm-hmm.
So we like did that and just sort of messed around. But I remember thinking it was super fun, and I kind of like I always liked radio.
Mm-hmm.
And then
what were some shows or stations that you were listening to growing up in Jersey?
Oh, it was definitely like like Morning Zoo, like Scott Shannon, like FM Morning Zoo, like definitely like I think it was like the Z100 Morning Zoo, like comedy album, like cassette volume 3 that came out in probably like about 1988. It was definitely like a seminal comedy work of art.
Oh yeah,
in my life,
Oh yeah.
And I've talked to other friends who grew up in New York who are in comedy now who are like, yes, I remember that cassette. Like those shows were really funny. Like I still have a great appreciation. Like I've worked in public radio, and I hate the condescension towards talk radio that people in public radio have. Like,
oh yeah,
great talk radio, and like a great Morning Zoo, which I get that there are a lot of crappy ones out there. But like, when it's done well, it's just so good. It's so funny.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I agree with you completely. Like when you have like 3 people that are kind of that vibe together, and they're doing the weather or like doing the news, throw into the couple songs. Yeah,
well, they had comedy
really
sketches. They had comedy sketches and parody songs that were so funny. And they had this guy, Mr. Leonard, who may still be kicking around somewhere. I don't know who that guy is. He was like this character. I don't know what his backstory was, but he was always hilarious and weird. He was kind of like the Mr. Furley of the Morning Zoo. And I remember Mr. Leonard. Oh, they were so funny.
Yeah.
So like I always knew I wanted to try to be funny, and like I
Did you like stand up also?
Oh yeah. I remember like we would go in the summertime. We would rent a house in Martha's Vineyard, and and the cable got Comedy Central before we had Comedy Central in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I would just like watch Comedy Central for hours. And then when we got Comedy Central in New Jersey, it was such a big deal. We were so excited, and that was back when like Comedy Central really was mostly stand up.
Yeah, like it was all the Comedy Central Presents and Premium Blend, and was Premium Blend on?
Yeah, I mean it might have been. Before, I mean it was like reruns. I don't know if they were making their own content early on. It was like they had a thing called short attention span theater.
Oh yeah, was this when Maron was
Maron
hosting?
hosted it. A few different people hosted it, and that was like a lot of clips, like comedy clips. They would pull. It was kind of like the Netflix model of like just sort of like buy old content from other people and play that because we can't afford to make our own yet.
Right.
So that I definitely remember early days of Comedy Central. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely those half hours were so important to like giving me an idea of what stand up was. Like I still remember Jim David, his half hour. I think he was the first gay comedian I had ever seen, because like coming from like a really small town, there was like maybe 3 gay people in my high school. So like hearing the one joke I still remember him doing is him saying to his dad, was saying him and his partner were like, "What do you do?" And his response was, "Well, Dad, you know all that stuff you want Mom to do, but she won't." That's it. I just thought that was the funniest thing. That's like the first time I remember being like a teenager and like laughing at stand-up. Because stand-up, all stand-up to me before that was Jeff Foxworthy and Bill Cosby himself.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, there are others. There are other people who do stand up. It was really important that. Yeah. So you're into comedy. You're into media, and you're going to and then moving from like the New Jersey, New York area up to Boston. What was your major?
Political science.
Political science.
Yeah. I didn't really major in media. I was just sort of interested in it. I always sort of figured I would either like go to be in media or I would go to law school. But media still always seemed more fun. And I remember like going into senior year, I had signed up for a class called Internship in Politics. And back then, if you wanted an internship, you had to go to the career office and pull out a binder called Internship in Politics, and it had actual pieces of paper listing all the different internships in politics that you could get. Like there was no website where you would go.
Yeah.
And I was leafing through the papers, reading it. It was like lick envelopes for this candidate or that candidate. Like, this sounds kind of boring. And I
busy work.
Yeah, and I put that binder on the shelf, and I pulled down the binder that says internships in communications, and it's like intern at this radio show, intern at that radio show, and I was like, sounds way more fun. That's what I want. And so I switched. I said, forget internship in politics. I'm doing internship in communications.
Yeah.
And I got an internship at a morning radio show in Boston, and that was kind of like my first sort of real thing in radio.
What was the name of the show?
I think it might have been called The Robin Young Show. It was on WBOS 92.9 FM in Boston, and it was the morning show hosted by Robin Young, who now hosts Here and Now, which is a national show on NPR based out of Boston. It was also hosted by a guy named George Knight, who I liked a lot. And it was just like exciting to like go in and be in the city and like, you know, be on, like they put me on the air a couple times. And I started learning the beginnings of like cutting tape and you know, it was just fun. It was exciting. And they didn't have a ton of interns. So I went to intern for a show called Maddie in the Morning, which is a little more like shock jock, wannabe shock.
Like very Howard inspired. Howard Stern.
Yeah, but not nearly as funny. And I went there one day to intern there, and they showed me how to work the coffee machine. And there were two other interns who'd been there longer, and and I was like, this is not a good sign. Like, I don't need to come here to make coffee.
Right.
I want to learn something. And Robin Young was like, we don't have an intern. We desperately need an intern. Like, we're going to give you real work. We need someone. And I was like, great. Where do I, like, excellent. So, and she gave me real work, and I was like booking guests and like researching and like doing the real work of a low level producer. So it was great.
Yeah, which is what you want from an internship, like an actual educational element to it.
Right.
That's so important. That seems like it's like really important that you had that. That makes me think of my high school drama teacher who didn't like, he directed the show, but he mostly was like letting us do everything. Like, we designed the sets, we built the sets, we did the costumes. Like, it was a very hands-on kind of learning experience.
Yeah.
And so that show is more like NPR in tone, you would say, compared to like,
I mean, it was still a music.
It was still
a music channel. So it was like adult contemporary music, like rock music channel. But I think that it was definitely, there were some interviews, there was some news. You know, Robin ended up in public radio, so I think she definitely wanted it to be like a little bit sort of more grown-up, smarter, thoughtful morning music show, like the kind of show that like a professional would listen to on the way into work and like hear some good music and also like hear the news and learn a little something.
Right. As opposed to like, you know, wacky sound effects and toilet flushing sounds.
It wasn't. Yeah, there was no toilet flushing sounds on that show.
Yeah, I don't know why that, like the wacky sound effects are. I feel like that sort of leads into this negative perception of like the drive time show. Is the like. I just come back to this bit they did on Family Guy where like Stewie, like Brian's trying to do like a serious NPR style show and interview Gore Vidal, and then Stewie comes in and just turns into like porn stars and
right
hot dogs being thrown at people.
Yeah, I remember when I first started at WBOS, George Knight showed me how to cut tape, and I mean literally taking with a razor.
Wow.
Here's how to make an edit. You cut here, and then you tape it together. And then the next week they were like, "Look, we got a digital audio editing machine. Never mind, you don't ever need to cut tape with a razor again."
Oh wow.
And I was like, good. I'm glad that I can say that I was taught that skill, which I never actually learned, because at least I saw it. I'm going to be like, because it happened in my first week in radio and then it was gone. I will be like probably the last living person who actually saw tape get cut by hand.
Yeah.
And they brought in a digital thing, and they had this box, and it was like that. You could load on sound effects, and that's really what killed the idea. Because, like, you know, it's kind of like, and you hear it in high-end radio, too. Like, I think of it as, like, the radio labification. Like, Radio Lab came along and used sound in all these different interesting ways. And then it soon became, like, everyone starts copying it, and you forget who created it, and then it all kind of becomes a parody of itself.
Right.
And so like when we first got the technology that you could just hit a button and the sound effect would play immediately, you know, people got carried away. Like, it used to be that to play those sound effects, they would have like cartridges, and you would load up the cartridges in the machine, but you could only load up so many at a time, and they weren't quite so instantaneous, but you could still, like, if you knew what you were doing and you were good on the board, you could play those effects and you could get your timing right. And it was kind of fun and silly. Before that, the sound effects were homemade.
Right.
They'd have a guy who stood over in the corner with a bunch of like honk, you know, or whatever.
Like a Foley artist.
Right.
Kinda.
Like a guy who would, and someone fell down, he would like drop a dummy on the ground, you know. And then it got to the cartridges, and then when it became digital, then you could play 100 sound effects in 10 seconds, and that's when it became too much.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like, ooh, we have this new toy. Let's see what it can do.
Right.
Like I guess when the Beatles, I would almost think when the Beatles discovered the sitar, it's like, let's put this on every song.
Right.
or like reverb, like in the 50s, like there's so many like doo-wop songs or like vocal group songs that are just like sound like they were recorded in an aquarium, where it's just like the technology is like, ooh, let's see what we can do with it.
For sure.
So when you were interning, did you ever, were you thinking at that point, I'm going to host a show like this? Did that?
I pretty much always wanted to be on the radio. That was my goal. Like from the time that I was a senior in college, I was like, I want to be on the radio.
Mm-hmm. And were you still doing in the political science major at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I was very interested in it. I was kind of like, I was going to change my major at that point. I don't think what you major in really matters.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely like was steering the ship by senior year to like get experience in media. That's what I
media
wanted.
and radio.
So when I graduated college, I was interning at WBOS. I was hosting a show at radioboston.com, a now defunct internet radio station.
Yeah.
This was before smartphones, so you had to listen to radioboston.com by literally going
on radioboston.com.
Right, like you had to go to like turn on your desktop computer and navigate to radioboston.com and click play, maybe or through your laptop. So it's not surprising that it was a little before its time and it didn't last. But like it was certainly something that I was like, well, certainly at some point this is all going to go digital. Like this is the future. Like I should get in on digital audio. And I was doing that. I was writing for a local newspaper in Boston. So I was doing media and I was waiting tables to pay the bills. So like that's what I was doing for my first couple years out of college.
So you're doing all this stuff. And what year is this?
I graduated college in 99. So that was like 1999 to 2001, or my 2 years out of college in Boston.
Okay, so a couple years out of college in Boston, because I'm trying to track when the medium of podcasting kind of started. So that's still like several years. We're still several years off from that.
But I'll get you to that point. So like 2001 to 2000, so 99, 2001, I was in Boston. 2001, I moved to Chicago. 9/11 happened. Recession hit. There were no jobs.
Right.
I heard that this thing called there was a new progressive talk radio network being started in Chicago, and I started stalking the people who were creating it.
What was it called?
Well, wait for the payoff of my story, Will.
Okay. Sorry, Dan.
I started harassing the people who were creating it, and then eventually I learned that it was being moved to New York, and it was going to be created in New York, and that ended up becoming Air America Radio, which was and I got a job there just by harassing them and stalking them, but I had to move to New York. But that was where I met Marc Maron, and I produced Marc Maron's show there, and I worked with like Rachel Maddow, and Al Franken was there, and Janine Garofalo, and that was like my first really big job in radio, so that was super exciting.
So you were a producer on Morning's Edition.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yes.
So you met Maron like way before like he became successful. So what was your experience with him at that point specifically? I only ask because I'm a fan.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a great experience. I mean, it was an amazing experience. But we had a team of comedy writers working on the show who were all like, Daily Show guys, and, who had amazing resumes, super talented. I had never been in an environment like that with this kind of experience.
And his was like a pretty heavy news show.
Well, by Air America standards, it was the most comedy-centric show.
Right.
And the most general interest show. Like, we would have musicians on. We would have filmmakers on. Like, it wasn't straight politics. Whereas, like,
right.
Like Al Franken or Rachel Maddow would do, like, straight politics, news and politics. So we did arts and culture, we did comedy more than the other shows, but it was still probably the most political thing Marc had ever done.
Right.
And we had a co-host named Marc Riley who was more of a news guy.
Yeah, I remember.
And so,
Marc Riley.
Like we were working insane hours. I was the first one in every morning. I would get in. Or when we first launched the station, I was getting in at like 1 a.m. By the time after 6 months, maybe we were kind of got our shit together. It was like I was getting in at 3 a.m.
Right.
And look, Maron, he was a great guy to work with. He's definitely, like the guy that you hear on the show and in his TV show and in his stand-up, like that's who he is.
Yeah.
Like it's not an act.
Yeah, I love that about him. Like,
he's super smart. He's very thoughtful. He has a temper, which he'll be the first to tell you.
Right.
And he is a guy who has his own struggles, which has also like spent his whole career telling you all about.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm not breaking any news.
Yeah.
But what I always admired about him was that, unlike some of the other hosts who came into Air America who had previous careers as comedians or actors or famous talent, Marc came in and recognized that he had never hosted a radio show before, and that was something different than he had ever done before, and that was going to require a lot of hard work,
right,
to get good at. It was a skill, a craft he needed to hone and pick up.
Yeah.
As opposed to just strolling into being like, "What? I'm funny. Everyone knows I'm funny. I'm just going to talk. Don't tell me how to talk."
Right.
He worked his ass off on that show, and we all worked our butts off on that show.
Yeah, because if you're getting in, because you have to like crunch the news of the day and then like.
Right, and we were live on the radio 5 days a week, 6 to 9 a.m. And we did comedy sketches, we did interviews, we did news reports, we did all kinds of things, and we did rants and all these comedy bits, and so. So it was awesome. I mean, I learned a ton. The two seminal jobs that I've had in my career before launching the Sporkful were Morning Sedition.
Yeah.
And then I helped create and launch a show called The Bryant Park Project at NPR. So those two things, like the sort of the news talk radio with comedy and a lot of edge and attitude, and then the sort of like the NPR thing, which also still informs a lot of what I do. Then there was the NPR thing, which that NPR show was much more conversational and younger and more laid back than Morning Edition or something.
Yeah,
but it was still NPR.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and I don't know if this style that because this style is rooted in This American Life, the idea of like interweaving music and interviews, and then the narrative started with This American Life or not, but that's very much what I view as like if I was to describe to like aliens what an NPR show was, I would say it like that. And I think what your show does very well is like I would essentially describe you as the food This American Life, like the MSG episode, which I thought was fascinating, like learning how like it's like rooted in like just one guy who would get headaches,
right?
Essentially, like and can probably more than a little bit of racism,
right?
Like stuff like that. Those sort of like deep digging, like, I would have never thought to think about that. Those kinds of stories,
right?
Yeah, like that's very much what I think the like modern NPR like. Intellectual, slightly intellectual but laid back sort of radio vibe is now.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly podcasting, is dominated by that sensibility to a fault, I think. I mean, podcasting. I mean, really, most of podcasting falls into one of those two categories of either like the talk radio, of like what I did at Morning Sedition, or like This American Life.
Yeah,
I kind of try to split the difference. For better or worse, but yeah, no, I think that sensibility is like there's way too many people out there trying to imitate This American Life.
I think so, and that's like there's a lot of shows that do that very well. So the idea comes in like setting yourself apart. Like I just think about how many interview podcasts with comedians are there,
right?
And then just like trying to stand out in like what I'm curious about and what I'm curious about with the people I talk to is about. So I one thing I want to ask before I want to get into this to the Sporkful is when you were at Morning Sedition and Bryant Park, what are some of like key things you learned as far as like producing radio? What are some of the most important things you learned at those jobs as far as what goes into making good radio or hosting good radio?
I mean, I don't know that the most important things that I learned there were those things. It's more like, I just had to, I was young and full of hubris. I had to get sort of knocked down a peg to some degree, which was good. And then I also just, you got to learn to work with other people. You got to learn to get along with people that you don't always agree with, and make sure that people in your group feel included and that they're getting a chance to contribute ideas. And that's a hard thing to do. And I watched bosses of mine fail at and tried to get better at it myself. But certainly at Air America, like I was young.
Uh-huh.
And at NPR too, like I had to learn those things in terms of like what I learned in terms of actually making the shows. I think that when you're young, you don't want anyone to tell you. You don't really want an editor.
Mm-hmm.
When you're young, you don't want anyone to tell you that your thing could be better, or
Right.
that this part that you love should get cut out.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get older and you get more experienced, you become less precious about your own work, and you become more like mercenary. Like, no, this isn't good enough. Cut it. This part's no good. Cut that. Rework this. Like now, when I listen to my own work, I'm much more likely to be like, all right, this like. I think I'm a lot better, but part of the reason why I'm better is that I'm more
Critical?
critical of myself, or just like I would say more objective.
Yeah.
I'm able to because I was a producer for so long before I became a host. I have a much more clinical. I'm able to listen to myself with some distance.
Yeah.
So that I can say like this part's boring. Like this part where I just talked for 3 straight minutes, that was boring. I'm going to cut that part out. Or like this question that I asked that I think was a brilliant question, but you know what? The guest didn't have a good answer. So it doesn't matter how smart my question was. It didn't serve the show, so I'm going to cut it out. Whereas when I was 25, I would have left it in to try to show everyone how smart my questions are.
Right. Yeah. It becomes you're able to detach a little bit of it from like your self-worth as a human.
Right.
Yeah, I've definitely found that. Like when I was a monster in bands in college, I was like, no, you're going to play it my way because I'm right and you're obviously an idiot if you're questioning me.
Right.
Whereas now I'd be like, hey, what do you think we could do for this part? Or like, just that's such an important thing. Like the learning to collaborate with people and like not get your feelings hurt for things and like not hurt others and including others. That's like a really important lesson that I don't know if it comes with age or, again, talking about being humbled. Feel like there's a humbling that occurs in like your late 20s, like 30s.
Yeah, I think it's good to go through that for sure,
Mm-hmm.
And but I think at the same time you have to have the courage of your convictions. So a lot of the struggle is about finding that balance between listening to other people, getting good feedback on your work, being critical of your own work, working always to make it better, never being satisfied. But also, like, you can't go around asking 500 different people for input.
Yeah.
Like, there's an opposite extreme that's not good. Like, you need to have an idea of what you want, and you need to be willing to tell other people that you don't like their suggestions, which I also do sometimes.
Yeah.
But now I feel like I'm at a point where I have a good balance. So we'll do an edited episode of the Sporkful, and it's me and 2 or 3 other people, and we all listen, and they all give me feedback, and I'll ask them, well, what did you think about this? But tell me more about that. And I'll ask them to explain, why do you think that part is good or bad? What do you think about this possible solution? And I put a lot of stock into all their opinions, but at the end of the day, I need to be like, yeah, you know what? I don't agree. Like some of them I'll be like, yes, that was a great suggestion. It's so much better now. I'm so glad that person opened my eyes to that. But other things I'll be like, nope, I think it's better this way. And I'm, and some people might still say that I'm wrong. But like, so finding that balance between listening to other people, working with other people, collaborating, getting good feedback, taking constructive criticism, but still also sometimes being able to say like, no, but I'm not just going to do something that's only designed to please this sort of like focus group, essentially.
Right.
Like I'm going to have the courage of my convictions and say like, no, I want it to be like this.
Yeah, because you still got to do the show you want to do.
Right. And to some degree, it's a matter of taste. So
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
so I don't want to make a show that isn't to my own taste.
Yeah, because then you might as well just have like any other job.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's what I always think about. That is like, when I think about like what comedians are on Comedy Central right now, it's like, I was like, yeah, maybe I could do something that's similar to that, and maybe that, but I don't. That's not who I am, and that's not.
Right.
At that point, I might as well just have any other job.
Right.
So I'm sure you got to get back to work, but I'm curious a little bit about your process as far as like creating like the Sporkful. Sporkful's been going on for how long?
Just about 9 years. It'll be 9 years in January.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Yeah.
And the show's really good, and like I love the kind of interviews you do, like the comedy people you get on, like Tim Dillon and Michael Ian Black. I'm curious about is the creation of an episode like a team effort, or do you come in with an idea and then and then there's the work of, okay, how do we realize that?
I mean, it's definitely it's a team effort, but I think anytime the creative process is really working well, by the time you get to the finished product, you've lost track of who had which idea. That's usually when it's the best ideas, because so many people have contributed good ideas to make it better, that you're like, well, I don't remember. Like, well, like if it, so, but basically, like, it could be my idea, it could be my producer Ann's idea. We'll bounce the idea around. I mean, some of our shows are straight ahead interviews. So if it's an interview with a celebrity or a comedian or something, then it's just sort of like, is this person interesting? What do we want to ask this person about? Usually I go in to any interview. There's usually one thing that I'm really interested in about the person. One big kind of like central nut issue, like about their experience or their perspective or their work or something that I'm like, this is the thing I really want to get to.
Yeah. Has Guy Fieri been on?
Yes, we had him a couple years ago.
What was the thing you were curious about with him?
I'm trying to remember.
Because he strikes me as, and I love that Shane Torres bit about Guy Fieri. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
You mean on SNL? Oh no, he's the one.
He's the stand-up comic who's like,
who says like, why is everyone mad at this guy? Yes.
Yeah, he strikes me as a nice guy to hang out with who could tell you some cool stories.
Yeah, no, he's a super nice guy. I think that a lot of the people who for a lot of the reason why he's so maligned is because, like, I think there's a lot of class judgments. There's sort of like limousine liberals who love to shit on Guy Fieri, because and there's an assumption that he must be a phony. The person that you see on TV must be an act, because nobody's really like that. And I think that if you think that nobody's really like that, it really actually just means that you don't know anyone like that.
Right.
So, but actually, there are a lot of people like that, including Guy Fieri. So the main things that I was interested to learn about with him were to what degree is the person we see on TV a persona? Mm-hmm. How self-conscious is he about it? How aware is he about himself and how he's perceived and how he comes across, and what does he really think about it? Mm-hmm. That was really it. That was the number one. That was it. Like, who is this guy really? That's the question everyone has about him. It's not the question everyone has about every celebrity, but I think the real question that everyone has about him is like, what is he really like?
Right, because they can't believe that he's that guy that they see on TV.
Right. And also the other thing I was interested to talk to him about that I wanted to highlight for listeners that I felt like never gets attention is that I perceived him to be a very savvy businessman.
Yeah.
He didn't just luck into his massive fortune.
Right.
And so I wanted to hear him talk about the building of a business empire in a very strategic way, because I don't think you hear him talk that way. Mm-hmm. And I think he is someone who puts a lot of thought into that and is a very ambitious person and has been singularly driven from a very young age to be a very successful food businessman. That was what his dream was from about the age of 8.
Right.
And he has pursued that goal with a single-minded purpose to the point of obsession.
Yeah.
To this insane degree of success. So to hear about him as someone who is super driven, ambitious, motivated, shrewd, a savvy business person, and also very self-conscious and aware of how he comes across on TV, and the degree to which that is intentional.
Right.
That's what I wanted to hear about from him.
Mm-hmm. And do you think you got that stuff from him?
I think we pretty much did. I think that he's... yes. I think we got it as well as could be expected from a guy who gets interviewed all the time and is very polished.
Yeah, and who's kind of used to the routine. Let me also ask you this, and we can wrap it up. As far as interview technique goes, and you can tell me how my interview technique's been over the course of this.
You're doing great, Will.
45 minutes. Thank you, Dan. Are there certain techniques that you have when you are interviewing someone to try to get the answers to certain questions? Because I think podcasting has the medium and like the feel of it. Like we're just sitting in the studio right now. It's very like laid back kind of feel compared to I would almost like compare to like a journalistic method of questioning, like on the news or something like that. Do you consciously have do you ever consciously have techniques that you when you go to interview someone to try to get the answers you want, or is there or do you just kind of approach the interview and see what will happen?
Some of both. I mean, you have to I feel like my instincts are better now than they used to be. Just through practice. I mean, I have a couple of sort of small rules and then kind of big rules. They're not all my rules. They're the rules that I have learned or have been taught to me. I didn't invent them. Don't ask yes or no. Don't ask yes or no questions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't answer your own questions. So, like, I think that there's a common thing that I have done sometimes, and I think that it's common that people do when they're interviewing someone is they say, like, so how do you like your cheeseburger? Do you like it with pickles and mustard and mayo? Or do you like it with relish and cucumber and celery? You know, or, I mean, I'm making up.
Like a Tiger Beat style question.
Right. And it's sort of like, just say, how do you like your cheeseburger? Like, ask open-ended questions. The job is to get the other person to talk. So don't ask a question and then offer multiple choice answers. Just ask the question in an open-ended way.
Yeah.
If there's something specific that you're trying to get to that you're not getting, sometimes you're not going to get it. Sometimes you have to ask it a second time in a different way. Sometimes you leave it and come back to it.
Right.
But the number one biggest thing is to listen. You have to listen and react in the moment. And there's always that, your brain has to be going on two levels simultaneously. There's your in the moment consciousness of listening thoughtfully and responding in the moment and trusting your instincts, knowing when to throw your notes in the garbage and follow something that the person just said down an interesting path.
Yeah.
But then you're also floating kind of at, 35,000 feet above the whole thing. Like, how is this going? Where is this going? How much time do I have left?
Right.
Like, what's the major stuff I need to make sure I get to? You're kind of managing the thing, big picture, at the same time that you're in the moment having a conversation. And that's a skill that you got to learn over time. And I certainly wasn't as good at it when I started out. I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm, same.
But, my approach now, so like my producer, Ann, will put together a ton of prep. Like maybe it'll be a 10 or 15-page Word document of all these quotes and excerpts of interviews and things the person has said and biographical information. And I'll read that a couple of times so that I kind of loosely commit it to memory, not word for word, but like the major points are in my head. Mm-hmm. And then I will write up a much smaller document that fits on like 2 pages max. That's just like bullet points.
Yeah.
So I want to know in my head going in, like, these are the 3 or 4 chunks. Like, these are the 3 or 4 chapters of the interview. We're going to start out talking about what they ate as a child. Then we're going to talk about this experience, and then we're going to talk about the book they wrote, and then we're going to talk about this. I just need to know those. And then in each of those, I want to have a few bullet points of the major stuff I want to make sure I hit.
Yeah.
But then that paper I only even look at a couple of times. I don't read off it too much. Basically, it's like prep a lot in advance, and then don't look too much at your paper.
Yeah.
Is my approach. Like, and then if you've prepped enough in advance and you've put enough of that stuff in your head and can recall it, then you can be in the moment more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you have that 35,000-foot plan in your head going in, then you can trust your instincts and be in the moment and have a real conversation with a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I knew a little bit about you, and I knew a little bit about the show, but like some of the stuff we talked about, I didn't know we were going to get into, and that's the exciting stuff for me when I interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Dan, I think this is great. I appreciate you doing this so much.
You did a great job, Will. This was great. A+.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it, and let me know when we're gonna go get that mustard pizza down on 23rd Street.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. Because
I don't know. Isn't it basically just a Reuben on a flatbread?
Essentially, but I think the cheese they use makes it a lot more interesting than
What's
that.
the cheese?
It's like a really sharp Wisconsin-style cheddar, and they bake it into the crust as well, so the crust tastes like Cheez-Its.
All right, that's intriguing.
Yeah, if you like Reubens, I think you'll dig it.
I mean, I don't know how it could be bad.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try it.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan.
Take care.
Okay, folks, that's our show for the week. Thank you for listening. And thank you to Dan for his time and for being such a gracious guest. If you enjoyed that, please feel free to tell a friend. Subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. I greatly appreciate you folks listening. As always, you can go to my website, willcareyisfunny.com. That's willcareyisfunny.com for a list of my upcoming stand-up dates. And you can follow me on Twitter at comicwillcarey. And thank you guys very much again for listening. I'll let you know about my upcoming shows I will have in the new year. So I will, again, thank you for listening, and I will see you next week between awesome and disaster. Take care, everyone.